Katie, thank you ever so much for joining me on the International Classroom podcast. Could you just give us a brief introduction about who you are and what it is that you do?
I sure can. Thanks, Alex. Great to be here. So my name is Katie Novak. I work at Smart Technologies as a global manager of content and communications. And I'm also our lead researcher on what we call our EdTech Assessment Tool. So what all that means in practice is that I get to work with teachers and students and partners all around the world around what they are doing with education technology and business technology as well, but we'll stick to talking about education today. And that I get to help create content, communicate with people out there using technology, and make sure that they have the resources to really create connections and utilize technology in the best ways in their classroom.
Fantastic. Well, absolute pleasure to have you on. So, thank you for being here. Whereabouts in the world do we find you today?
Well, I am actually in London, United Kingdom, right now. Typically, I'm located in Canada, but as part of my role at Smart, I do get to travel a fair bit. So I'm very grateful to currently be in London, both for some work and some leisure time.
Just out of curiosity, what's the weather like?
Looking out the window, it's a bit everywhere. We had a really intense rainstorm a couple of hours ago, and now it's just sort of traditionally English gray skies.
Great. I was about to say, as soon as you went traditionally English, I was like, it's grey, isn't it? It's a grey sky. Like, yeah, it is. Well, fair enough. You mentioned in that the EdTech Assessment Tool, and that's really the part I want to dive into a little bit today. I'm obviously... Smart Technologies is the collaborator with us here on the International Classroom. So I'm very fortunate I get to deal with and speak with Nadia, who's based here in the Middle East, and I get to see and experience some of these things. And it's great to have you on to actually talk about this, because it's something that I've kind of gone through, and it's like, it's quite insightful. It gives you another perspective. But just from your side, from the person who is sort of deep in the know and handling this from a global perspective, what is the EdTech Assessment Tool? How did it come about, and what is the purpose of it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'll start with the piece about how it came about. In our lives at Smart, of course, we, being around for more than 35 years now, had the opportunity, of course, to work with not only individual classrooms and individual schools, but school systems and organizations across the world that are implementing education technology. And looking around at some of the struggles and the challenges that people faced, at the ways that technology maybe wasn't working and wasn't making an impact. Because, of course, we've had technology in the classroom for many, many decades now, but outcomes have stayed relatively flat. And we sort of sat back and said, well, why is that? What are the common threads of when technology works in classrooms, and how can we understand better and maybe codify that? So what we did about 7 years ago was took a lot of different frameworks from different organizations around the world. So including ones like ISTE, the OECD, CASEL, UNESCO, frameworks for capabilities in education technology. Did a big literature review of all of them and said, okay, what are the things that really matter here in terms of capability development around things like professional development, network and infrastructure, strategic planning. So we were able to distill that down to what is now a set of 25 different capabilities that all have significant impact on outcomes for education. And some of them have more than others. So within that body of research, we've been able to look at many, many different people taking this tool across the world and be able to look at what is the correlation between outcomes and what levels of capabilities people have in place. Are you great at strategic planning and therefore you have great outcomes? Are you not doing things that might lead to better outcomes? So it does two things. It allows individuals, schools, or systems to take the assessment, self-assess, and be able to get a personalized report about what works for them in their school, where they need to take action. And then it also allows us to look at the data on the back end and say, globally, or perhaps in a specific region, what's working. And then, I feel strongly that as a global organization, we have the responsibility to help other people with the insights that we have access to. So being able to share that back out and share what is working and what kind of places might people want to focus to help achieve the best possible outcomes with their technology.
I'm curious from what you've said there, and just to get some insights, what are some of the things that are working? So from the trends that you're seeing and the data that you're gathering, what are the types of strategies and assessment characteristics, EdTech tools that are having that impact in the classroom?
Yeah. So one of the things that came out really strongly over the last few years, particularly during the pandemic, was the idea that schools that were well developed in how they engage with a variety of stakeholders were seeing better outcomes, particularly when we look at schools and organizations that are involving the community, that are involving teachers, that are involving students in decision making. Having a really diverse group of stakeholders, understanding, what kind of tech are we putting in, why, how is it being used, and having that voice and opportunity for input to the decision making and the strategy is something that is a significant indicator of long-term success and outcomes with technology. We also see, a variety of things when it comes to network infrastructure, when it comes to professional development, and the idea that professional development that is consistent, collaborative, and flexible is also extremely important to making sure that teachers have what they need, again, to understand not just what is the technology, but why, how does it fit into my pedagogy, and how can I connect with other people and make sure that we are doing a lot of good things together in the same way.
Yeah, I think the idea of community there is really, really important, especially now with the ease, as it were, of how we can access, how we can share these types of things. So from your perspective, let's focus on you mentioned about professional development. How do you take the information that you've got then from these EdTech assessments? How do you then marry that up with teacher professional development?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we look at that sort of scope internally at SMART, we have an amazing team that supports professional development for teachers in a variety of different ways. So whether that's, free options that they provide for training, or whether that's really robust full implementation plans that bring in sort of from the start, enabling those champions within the organization, moving into to collaborative learning together, moving into kind of growing and that community building piece. And then being able to mirror that back to organizations. Every organization, or district or whoever we're talking to is going to be set up a little bit differently and is going to have different capacity in-house for professional development, right? But looking at some of those key pieces, where can you bring in champions that can be, the grassroots enablers of technology use? How can you make sure they have what they need and that they're being rewarded for time and energy spent to help build up people around them? Again, that community piece, right? And then making sure that it is really, ongoing, that people can connect and can grow on a regular basis is a piece that we focus on, and making sure that whatever we're providing is going to be able to help schools to do that on a regular basis. And again, that it's not just like, here's how to, turn something on, or here's how to use a feature. It's really about the why. We have to get into that why, that how does it integrate? How does it fit with the pedagogy? Because teachers don't have time for things that aren't why focused, right? They don't have time, and they know what they're doing, and we need to trust teachers and really be focused on how can we help them save time, how can we help them feel supported in their classrooms.
Definitely. I think the biggest question I always ask myself if I'm going into anything, if I'm sitting down in front of any professional development or being spoken to, is, why should I use this? And that's, I think a lot of teachers are in the same boat. And once you can overcome the why should I use this, the next question is always, okay, well, how do I use this? And if we can answer those two things and teachers then are on board, I think you're always onto a winner. Especially with what you're saying is taking into consideration so much of teachers' communities, and then what like the learning environments the schools need, rather than just going, well, here's a piece of hardware, or here's a piece of software, and just leaving them to it.
Yeah.
Which is often one of the challenges. And I think we come on to this concept then of challenges and solutions. We kind of mentioned the solutions. I think we've got plenty of solutions. But what are you seeing now as challenges that teachers face, especially with trying to integrate, smart technology?
Yeah, I mean, time, of course, I think consistently rises to the top as the biggest challenge, whether that's teachers, administrators, anyone else. That idea of time and the necessity of all of the different pieces of managing a classroom or a school. But thinking about teachers of managing a classroom, the relationships, the behavior, or however we want to refer to it, the learning is one part of it, but there's so much more to that. So I think the idea of time and money, I think, continues to, of course, be a significant challenge, everywhere in the world, right? The amount of funding that is or isn't available, and what that provides for teachers and students, and how can we make sure that's more equitable? Seeing that, pretty much everywhere, as a lot of COVID funding in places comes to an end, or things are changing and shifting in the prioritization of governments and things like that. Those key time and money pieces, and making sure that teachers have just the tools available. There's increasing, I think, amounts of desire for teachers to provide a personalized, accessible experience for students. So how can they do that without overburdening themselves, is a question I think is well worth talking about.
So let's dive into that one then, in terms of how do teachers, with the technology that Smart offers and the professional development that Smart offers, all those things, how is it then that makes it more of an effective process so that teachers can leverage that technology to support them, and then they're able to go, well, actually, now I've got much more time on my hands to spend with instruction and dealing with students, or I can go home and I'm not having to then go through all of this. What are the benefits of being able to use this technology?
Yeah. So when I look at thinking about some of the specific features that we have in tech that Smart creates, around being able to have, something as basic seeming, but a single point of sign on, something that's really easy for a student to connect their device to, right? They just need a QR code, or they need one, code to connect and be able to utilize a shared whiteboard with the teacher, for instance, if they're working off a smart board display. If they're working in Smart software, Lumio, again, super easy to get students signed on. Something as simple as that. They're going to sign on once, they're going to stay in the class, they're going to be able to interact from their devices. It seems like a really basic thing, but something that, a decision maker, a purchaser of technology isn't necessarily going to think about. But you best believe that a teacher is going to think about that every single time, they have to go through a clunky sign-on experience, right? The opportunity to have data built into software that can help teachers understand what students contributed to, a collaborative space that they're working in, whether that's a small group, a whole class, be able to quickly look at individual results as well for games, for activities, for these collaborative digital spaces, really keeping everything in one place so that teachers can quickly look at results, quickly understand the data. If we're looking at things like, game-based activities and other types of options, which are super valuable, especially for things like formative assessment, giving teachers that access to data that they can work with, look at with just a few clicks of a button, not having to go digging and looking for those. I would say those pieces in terms of saving time and providing simple ways for the students to access their learning, and then for the teachers to access the data, are huge pieces of focus for us.
Yeah, I mean, we got some videos. I was doing some recording with Nadia on Monday and playing around with the board and playing around with Lumio, and we've got some videos coming out soon about that. And obviously, previous podcasts, we've had some obviously advocates of Smart and Lumio within UAE on, and they all raved about Shout It Out. And
yes.
we got to play around. I got to play around with it on Monday, and yeah, it's really cool. I'm going to sort of pivot a little bit with this because I know where I want to go, but I'm curious of your perspective then. Because when we talk about EdTech and when we talk about the technology, and now we're talking about obviously integration of these things with hardware and software, what's coming more into the conversation now is AI. Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of curious about then strategies, talking about this concept of a digital strategy and what really EdTech tools are, so that people out there listening and watching are not just going, well, EdTech is AI, and maybe in the years to come, maybe that's all they'll think about. But if we're describing AI to someone, if we're describing EdTech tools and these technologies to people listening and watching, what would you describe an EdTech tool as?
I like that question. An EdTech tool is a piece of technology that helps to enable learning experiences in the classroom. That's, in my mind, the broadest definition. What does that look like in practice? Well, that might look like, an interactive screen, an interactive display at the front of the room. Obviously, smart boards, the thing we made at Smart and invented, are a big part of classrooms today, in the same way that, maybe an overhead projector with acetate was a big part of a classroom. For you and I. Those types of things are something that are important in a classroom, and things that can be used in multiple different ways. Other examples, of tech tools might even a Chromebook or an iPad, where students have their own type of device where they can be connected to a lesson, where they can be sharing their own learning, or even thinking of something like a podcast studio, for instance, that might be set up in a school, or these other types of pieces that help students to prepare for their futures, because ultimately, technology is going to be a big part of our futures, whether it's, devices, AI, or anything else that we haven't even thought of yet. So the idea that students need to learn both with and about technology to prepare them for the future is key. So making sure that they can do that in ways that are meaningful and accessible.
How do you see then, obviously, with the new information that's come out, obviously this week with Google, the new information that's come out from OpenAI, and obviously, as someone who's in that sphere of educational technology and obviously how it's advancing, how do you see then AI coming into technology and being able to, let's say, coexist and co-create with the type of technology that already exists?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways this could go. I think making sure that the biggest thing to me, I think that's important right now, is when we think about for school leaders and even teachers, thinking about the use of AI. In my mind, what's less important is how are we going to use it? What are the tools? Where does it integrate? Do we need to buy something new? Do we need to work it into our digital strategy? Do we need to have a strategy about it by itself? Just the idea of literacy about these kind of tools, I think is the most important piece where we can focus right now for how we talk about this in schools, right? Teachers, and you and I have chatted about this before too. There's some teachers that are very well versed and interested and curious and want to dive in more. And there's others that, can't even go there, right? Yeah. But the idea of literacy for teachers and for students about these tools, so that when they do, pop up with facial recognition in a camera, we can understand what that means. What are the implications of this? So when teachers do have the opportunity to utilize AI tools to save them time when it comes to things like creating lessons or creating assessment questions, which are things that are currently or in the very near future going to be readily available to a lot more teachers. What does that mean? How do we look at that, and how do I, as a teacher, make sure that that is a sound choice? Continuing to think critically about that, right? And also being really aware that students, regardless of what kind of policies get put in place for devices, for, utilizing AI in school or anything else, students are going to find ways to do things, because that's just the way it works. So again, giving students the tools, the literacy to say, how am I using this? Why does this benefit me? Again, thinking critically about what AI is doing, trying to help them understand what is, a language learning model. What does that mean? How is this getting me the information that it's getting, and what gaps am I missing? I think those are the most important things that we need to be thinking about with AI right now, so that we can give students the proper preparation. Because again, it's not going anywhere. No. We need to make sure we're preparing them to use it.
Yeah, and obviously just that discussion of when we talk about AI literacy, like what do you mean for the people maybe that have heard this term a lot but maybe haven't had it explained or defined to them? What is your definition of then AI literacy?
Yeah, so I think we'll all come from different starting points, but understanding what is ChatGPT. Just a little bit of like what's happening in the back end. You don't need to understand all the details there, but what's going on when I'm asking that a question? Is it Google? What's happening here? Yeah. Understanding how some of those models work to whatever degree you might be comfortable with, but then also, again, understanding what the gaps are. Of course, when ChatGPT first came on the scene and we only had data in it up to a specific year, understanding what that means for answers and responses, and being able to know what you're dealing with, at least enough to make some informed decisions about, is this the right thing to use in the way that I'm thinking of using it?
Definitely. And that's a really nice segue, because one of the amazing things that Smart Professional Development does, having played around with the platform the other day, is not only do you have PD for, let's say, educators, we've got Lumio, which is software PD. We've got Smart, which is hardware PD. You then also have the technician PD.
Yes.
And that, for me, I like the segue we've done there, by the way, is about understanding how the boards work and understanding how the technology works, and actually being there to go, I know how this is working. I know then how to set this up. Understanding the bits behind the pretty things, basically. And I think, like you say, the literacy of it, if you're using a piece of EdTech, and I think there's a clear difference here. Like, you don't need AI to successfully, use technology. It is a tool that can help, but it isn't necessary. You don't need it. I think is the point. We want students to be skillful, and I think that's one of the things we're coming across at the moment is skills. And what are the things that you offer in the software? Lumio is developing critical thinking and collaboration and creativity, and so AI is a tool that can help with that, but it isn't the be-all and end-all tool with this. There are things that you can still do to have a fantastic and outstanding lesson. But to cross that, to cross-bridge this, as you were, I was playing around with my AI just yesterday, because I've had access to quite a few people, access to the new GPT 4.0. And obviously it's connected to the internet. And I just went to it. I said, tell me about Smart Lumio. And it did. It can, obviously it's there. And I said, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, tell me everything, tool, characteristic that Lumio does. And it went through, my phone's just there, I could read them off, but it went through everything. And I said, be more specific about the game-based and the assessments and this. And I said, give me one sentence. And it reeled off everything, every different thing that you can use on Lumio with a brief description. So in my head, I'm thinking, gosh, if I had Lumio and I wanted to try and use this as a small increment to help me with my lesson planning, I could actually go, I'm using Lumio. I've got all these. This is my lesson. What would you recommend, and what should I do? And so I was really excited about it. I thought, I'm going to show Nadia this, and I'll make a video about it. It'll be amazing. I get to it. I just let it all out already. But things like that, in terms of just being able to go, well, this technology, and being able to leverage that and still create fantastic lessons, and whether the kids use it or not, I just thought it was really cool that the fact that it had access to this, it could see everything and it could tell me about everything. So if I was using Lumio, and they've got this professional development part there, but I was curious about something else, I've got the community I could go to, great. But even I could then go, well, maybe I'll just dive into this and ask AI, and it can teach me about Lumio as well. That's the kind of part that I liked as a professional development tool, which kind of we've talked a little bit about the teacher training and support that we've got there. And obviously the resources and going on to that. But, if you were to pick out sort of one thing that you've seen and that you think has the benefit, in terms of the support and the teacher training, what is the best example that you could give?
In terms of what we offer at Smart?
Yeah. So for this idea that the teacher training and support, what you've got there, what do you think has the biggest impact, and is the best piece of advice that if there was teachers listening and go, like, just go and do one thing, what would that one thing be?
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing would be community. We have, community when you need support. As you've said, there's a number of different, we have a number of different options. We have our free learning academy. That's great. We have lots of YouTube videos for all of those pieces, but I think, and to your point about AI, the best option often is a friend, is a thought partner. And we have things, like Facebook groups in a lot of different places in the world, where not only as a teacher can you look around and say, oh, I'm not alone. Look at all these people like me trying to do something, but also get ideas. We have an amazing global ambassador community. And I would say that taking a little bit of time, finding yourself a little bit of time on a regular basis to connect with community would absolutely be my priority.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that. Having talked to recently a lot of people about professional learning networks and the impact they have, and just, I think the key thing is I have this running joke with a few friends of mine who are ex-teachers, work in education. But this running joke of, we just parachute into schools. That's what you do. You parachute in, you don't live and breathe it, and then you go. And we kind of had this running joke about it to some extent. But what you're saying there, I completely agree with it. Actually, having these champions, teachers who are at the coalface, who know the trials, the challenges, and the successes, and being able to share that, I think teachers benefit so much more from that, in terms of being able to learn from those experiences. And so having that community group, I think is a fantastic piece of advice for people out there, whether they are long in the tooth with using Smart or whether just getting started with it. I think, dig out those community. And again, there's the community access, isn't there, through the website, and you've mentioned Facebook and all those different things. So fantastic. Let's address then potentially parental concerns. I think with anything that's technology based, anything that is online, we've sat in schools and we have these, obviously, being internet safe for children. How does Smart go about ensuring that data security, children are safe when they are using sort of the technology and working online?
Yeah, that's absolutely critical, and something that we at Smart are thinking about all the time to make sure that we are doing absolutely everything we can to safeguard that student data, to make sure that they're having a safe experience. We are not collecting any identifiable student data. When students log into some of our systems, they might be utilizing kind of a collaboration with a learning management system. So through kind of their already existing, email that they have through their LMS, or they don't even necessarily need to do that. They can log in as a guest if they kind of a school wants to be one more step removed. Even they can log into a lesson as a guest, use any name. Hopefully, they're going to use a right name so that the teachers have access to their data in the back end. But there's a lot of different options for how students access. And at no point are we collecting, identifiable student data, but really the only data that is needed for teachers to get that insight to the learning. We're consistently also making sure that everything is up to date. We provide over-the-air updates when we're talking hardware. We provide over-the-air updates to the vast majority of our interactive displays, so that they are running, the latest and greatest versions of Android software that have all of the security patches, that have all of those security features built right in to take that ease off of a technician and off of a parent. You don't need to worry that, that something might be accessible externally, that there might be data sent anywhere that it doesn't need to go, because we're consistently looking at that. And of course, making sure, at a bare minimum that we are complying with all of the different global privacy laws. That's the absolute starting point. But really, really going above and beyond that and making sure that all of the built-in features to the tech are consistently up to date, consistently safe.
Yeah, I think that's super reassuring, especially from a data perspective and everything we have going on in the world. Keeping everyone safe online is really, really important. So that's really good to hear. So shifting to a focus looking forward, what are the types of innovations and advancements that we can expect to see from SMART in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. Without saying too much, of course, we are looking at, we'll be looking at things like AI. How can that benefit teachers through the use of our hardware and our software? What are the right ways to deploy that? Things that our team are looking at. Again, consistently looking at what are the features we can add to save time for teachers, whether those are little pieces, are amazing team that works on Lumio just did a big event where they implemented a bunch of new features and functionality, did kind of a heads down hackathon type few days, and we're able to bring in some of those features. And a lot of those are consistently focused around saving teachers time. How can we make their lives a little bit easier? How can we bring in, lesson content that's super new and relevant? And we're always looking at what are the things that teachers need in the classroom, and how can we make that a really great experience? Even something as simple as our newest display has a multicolor pen, right? If you remember those pens that were like blue and white, and you could switch the different colors, right? It's basically that in a digital form, which is fun and interesting. And also you don't have to press a bunch of buttons to get a different color of ink to highlight something, when you're delivering your lesson. So things like that. And of course, there's always some bigger, exciting pieces in the works as well.
That definitely sounds like one of those watch this space type of comments there.
For sure.
So if people want to find out more about smart technologies, smart boards, Lumio, where is the best place for them to go and look?
Yeah, definitely head over to our website, smarttech.com. You can find all of the information about our products, about the EdTech Assessment Tool, about Lumio there. You can also find us across all of the social media channels. Take your pick. We're there. Both Smart and Lumio are across all of those, and we would love to see you there.
Yeah, and just to reiterate with that, the EdTech Assessment Tool is free, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Yeah, totally free. You get an immediate personalized report after you complete it, so you can look at the insights there. And we're also happy to work with schools, districts, and organizations to help interpret their results and help them get to that next level of insight, so they know what steps to take next.
Yeah, and this is on a global scale as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have over 7,000 records, 7,000 self-assessments completed across the world. So we're able to see some really interesting stuff about what's working in different parts of the world.
Fantastic. And just out of curiosity, but in terms of this data, will it get published? Will it get turned into anything so that's then usable?
Yeah, definitely. So we do have some white papers that are available. We can probably link to a few of those in the show notes for you. And we're continuing to look at that. So our socials are actually a good place. We're going to be launching some of the data and insights around things like what does great engagement with students in terms of tech planning look like? For instance, that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Some insights there. So, definitely lots more to come on that as we, again, have that responsibility to share information. So we definitely plan on continuing to do that.
I think that would be amazing, because those are the types of things that teachers want to dive into. We want to see impact. It's like we want to see the intent. We want to see how it's implemented. Like these idea of 3 I's that were brought out into the UK from Ofsted, but in terms of curriculum, the intent, the implementation, and the impact of it. if we're addressing those and sharing that data from a global perspective, I think that's a phenomenal resource for educators and research administrators, people just to look into and go, oh, actually, there's validity to using this and having this. I've seen it firsthand, and I'm sure there's lots of educators out there and administrators and schools that have that as well. But for those people who don't, who are considering, oh, we want to get this, what should we have? It's well worth having a look at. I end all podcasts with the same question. I always feel like it puts people on the spot a little bit and everyone gets flustered, but I'm just pre-warning you, I'm going to do it anyway. What is the one question, Katie, that I should have asked you today that I haven't?
Ooh. How about what's my favorite part of my job?
That is a really good question. So, Katie, what is the favorite part of your job?
Oh, Alex, I'm so glad that you asked. It's going to sound a little bit cheesy, but building connections with people. Just this week, I had the opportunity to visit a special school up in the north of England, and see and have a bit of a tour of their school and understand what are the challenges that they're facing in their school with their student population. They were talking about, saving up money for a new AV system in their auditorium, and they don't have a ton of funding. And there's things that they'd like to be doing, but they're not. And really seeing that firsthand, being able to talk with some of the students there, being able to chat with the head teacher and understand what they're facing every single day, that will always be my favorite part, because that's really getting to the heart of what we do and what inspires me to get out of bed every day and do what I do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you mentioned earlier about equity. It's a conversation that will rave on for a long time, isn't it? In terms of the haves and the have-nots and the gaps that appear there. North of England, when you say north, obviously for some people that's London. Anywhere above London's north. But for the rest of us who know England and are from there, when you say north, Manchester, Leeds, further north, Newcastle.
Yeah, just outside of Leeds.
Oh, there we go. Proper north. Yeah. There we go. We're okay. My London friends would go Watford, which is literally a stone's throw from London, is north.
Yeah, no, like really north. I've actually got my Yorkshire flat cap that my colleague gave me, so I've had the true Northern England experience.
And did they give you a proper cup of tea?
Of course.
There we go. There we go. Fantastic. Well, Katie, thank you ever so much for taking the time out. Obviously, you jet setting around. I say that, but really you're in greyish England. But thank you for coming to speak to us on the International Classroom Podcast and just sharing the benefits of obviously smart technology and the work that you are doing, and just the fantastic work as a company, a global brand that they are doing as well. And again, it's one of the reasons we've partnered up. It's the values that you guys have and what you're trying to do is something that aligns heavily with me. And so having the opportunity to speak with you and learn more from you about those things, and especially the EdTech assessment, which I cannot just sort of reiterate enough how valuable I think it is at this moment in time for people to go on and just take that literally 10 minutes of your time, but so insightful, so valuable as we continue to move forward, just to have that information. So really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your time in England. Safe travels and safe journeys back to Canada when you do.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Alex. Take care.